Ho, 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 and Merry Christmas, and welcome to the Yuletide episode of the Jim Crockett Experience. No, it may not be Christmas Day, but it's close to goddamn enough, and it's the last time we're going to talk to you before Christmas. So bear with me on this. And today, on the Christmas episode of the Cultcast, we've got letters, we've got Christmas poems, we've got an update on my Twitter and drive-through evisceration of Fatty McFatfuck and Impact Wrestling's twitchy product, and so much more. And to join me in this very festive occasion, a Festivus for the rest of us, ladies and gentlemen, he's Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you, Swammy's Pappy, the post office playboy, the proprietor of the French Toast Chapeau, the great Brian Last.
Chateau. Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be here once again.
And your hat.
What?
Stick it in your hat. It's a chapeau.
I will stick it in my hat, but I also want to wish everyone a happy Kwanzaa out there listening to the Jim Crockett Experience this week. Happy Kwanzaa, everyone.
And when is Kwanzaa?
I don't know. I think I think Christmas and Kwanzaa are usually at the end. Hanukkah is usually earlier in the month.
When is Festivus?
There's an actual date. Isn't there an actual date for Festivus? Because I always see people announce, like on Twitter or Facebook, today's Festivus, and they put a picture of George Costanza's dad with a pole. And I'm thinking, was there an actual date on the show and I just don't remember it?
Winter solstice is December 21st, by the way, so we're close to that. Happy solstice, everybody.
The days will get longer. It'll be nice.
My days couldn't get any longer. I don't know about you, pal. Oh, God, we got to talk about the at the top of the program here, the news story from last week on The Experience. The Midnight Express books. And, you know, Brian, I'm going to admit something I usually don't admit to. I've fucked up here, and I'm about to tell you why. Just take this ride with me. But I've fucked up. Because, as I mentioned to everybody last week, you know, I'd seen Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton in Nashville at our 35th anniversary reunion at the Nashville Comic Con. And Dennis, and of course, with his battle with cancer, we hadn't seen him in 4 or 5 years, and so he hadn't had a chance to even ask this question, but he had some Midnight Express books left in his closet, and these things have become coveted and sought after prized collector's items, that's a moral of the story. Every time I do something like this, buy it, because it's not like collector plates. My shit doesn't go down. It appreciates in value. But anyway, so he brought the Midnight Express books to Nashville, and me and Bobby and Dennis, all three signed them. And I knew that people would be appreciative, because I'm always asked about the Midnight Express books. I'm going to put them on sale, but I'm not going to be a sucker about this, because they are valuable. Somebody tweeted last week, there's one in the half price books in Lexington in the collectibles section for $100 just signed by me. Right.
Yeah. So
anyway, I when we got the books, I said, all right, and I didn't even mention this last week, but we did equally share in the money. I said, I'm going to make you guys some Christmas money here. I'll put them up on the site. I bet some of the fans will jump right on it. It may take a while to sell all of them. So Bobby and Dennis do thank you, by the way, or Bobby and Dennis do thank you for the Christmas money that they've gotten so far here.
And Stan says, what about me?
And Stan, and if you come to one of the reunions where Stan is with all four of us, then he will sign the book also, if you got it. But anyway, but I didn't want to be a price gouger. I know everybody's wanting this book, but I'm like, I don't want to be like where people are saying, oh, Cornette's being a fucking asshole. He's charged $1,000 for this fucking book. You know, he's raping us. He's price gouging us, whatever. And I wanted it to be where a normal Midnight Express fan, wrestling fan could realistically get this book, even though it is recognizing its value, coveted and prized, but still the normal folks. And I thought, well, if I set the price at $150, that'll weed out the people that aren't serious. It'll be somebody that really wants the book, but it's not outrageous. And they sold out in 6 hours.
Wow.
50 of them, 2 boxes. So I drastically underpriced the value of the Midnight Express scrapbook. And for that, I apologize to myself. But for all the people who got it and landed, it was as soon as the show went up that morning. By 2:00 that day, we were out. So once again, we appreciated everybody. But get my next book is all I can say. Get 2 copies. Save one for, it's like the Amazing Fantasy 15 that I got for $25 in 1973 and sold for $25,000 in 2018. It was better than buying like General Motors or whatever. Jim Cornette products appreciate better than the stock market is these days, with fucking President Cocksocket in charge of it going fucking crazy. But anyway, but I will say this. If you missed out on the Midnight Book, the Midnight Express picture, 8x10 of me, Bobby Eaton, and Dennis Condrey, signed by all 3 of us, is still available on a limited basis. I think about probably 30 or 35% of those are gone. But once again, it's a split down the middle, folks. They're sharing in the proceeds, but $5 from each of the Midnight Express pictures will go to the American Cancer Society in honor of Dennis's victory. And here's the deal. When we announced that, the picture started selling, but John Fell in Baltimore and Jacked Up Jeremy Bagley both not only bought the picture, but donated $150 each on top of that to the American Cancer Society.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool.
So, and some other people have donated as well, but that shows the power for good of the cult of Cornette, right?
The power for good. Yes. Some people may have other thoughts, but yes, the power for good of the.
Well, no, we're getting money donated for cancer. We're getting money donated for the Crusade for Children. We're bringing the classic wrestling knowledge to the masses, and we're getting the Outlaw Mud Show fucks shut down. That's what we're doing here. That's a positive thing. But anyway, and also just real quickly, we're still taking orders at jimcornette.com. We will be shipping Friday the 21st and Monday the 23rd, and after that, your ass on your own for a couple days because your fearless cult leader is taking about 3 days off. But I encourage everyone to send me their Christmas money starting on December 26th. And we'll be back to after the first of the year, especially back to a regular shipping schedule. But you ain't going to get it for Christmas anyway if you don't order it until the 24th or whatever. Right?
Right. I've learned all about that.
What are you doing all this week on your shows and for the holidays? Are you working Christmas Day? You workaholic?
I have not taken off a day of work other than Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I work every single day of the year. Lots of things coming up on the shows. Of course, I want to mention Ron Fuller's Studcast, available at fullerpod.com. Breaking Kayfabe with Baldwin and Barry at baldwinpod.com. Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam and Sean Goodwin at mcadampod.com. Of course, Kentucky Fried Wrestling with Scott Bowden at kfrpod.com. And the Mid-South Wrestling Television Review with myself and Mike Mills, available at midsouthpod.com. And don't forget the 605 Super Podcast, The Mothership. We have a holiday Star Wars that will be coming at you very soon.
Holiday Star Wars,
Holiday Star Wars. I think we're going to be making several crank phone calls to a friend in Louisville, Kentucky on that episode of the show. Stay tuned. Usually the Holiday Star Wars is where many of the co-hosts and guests from the Super Podcast all get together and we have a real fun session where we talk about who knows what. So check that out at 605pod.com. And once again,
I've always wanted to hear you and those fun co-hosts talk about who knows what.
Well, maybe if you're lucky, one of these days we'll include you in this fun session.
And possibly even some Who Shot John.
Who Shot John?
If you talk about who knows what, you got to talk about Who Shot John.
One more thing I want to say. I want to thank everyone once again. The 605 Super Podcast anniversary episode, our most popular episode ever, and I'm very appreciative of that. The reaction has been overwhelming. More top 10 coming in 2019. I want to make that announcement right here on The Mothership.
Now, I was on that show that everybody was praising, wasn't I?
Oh, now you're going to take credit for it.
I'm just asking a question. I wasn't.
You were in
commenting either way.
Several small segments on that show, yes.
Several small key segments on the program. That's what you're saying. That everything else was built and shaped around for the big payoff. I come in for the payoff, baby.
You left before the payoff, from what I remember.
Well, it was dragging. Anyway. No, shut up now. I've got a letter that I want to read. And for obvious reasons, I will not mention the name of the writer, but I've met this gentleman and he's legitimate. I'll say that, but I'm not going to mention his name or possibly anything that might narrow it down. There may be a government or two looking for him, as you will find out here in a second. But anyway, blah, 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 stuff that would identify him. Okay. I rented a home in Tijuana, Mexico, so that I should mention that this guy is an attorney and it is not Stephen P. New. So we'll clear that up right there. But he is an attorney. He doesn't just play one on TV. I rented a home in Tijuana, Mexico, so that I can provide legal assistance to the South Americans seeking political asylum. At some point, I may send you some cell phone videos and commentary about what is really happening here on the southern border of California. I was one of the folks hit with tear gas by the United States government, along with dozens of babies, mothers who were sitting on the ground coloring in coloring books and eating sandwiches that myself and other volunteers were passing out. Apparently, there was some disturbance, but there was no run for the border, quote unquote. No one was near enough to the border to actually come close to crossing. Where I was, we didn't even know anything was happening until we started to get shot with rubber bullets and tear gas. Mothers, kids, volunteers like myself, and lawyers from the National Lawyer Guild were the targets of the U.S. military. There is no news media here. No one is covering what is really happening. That day, moms and their young children were washing their faces in the sewer water of the Tijuana River, polluted because the United States deports all brown people to Tijuana rather than their country of origin, so they live in the Tijuana riverbed until they find their next chance to attempt to cross. Because when they are deported into Tijuana without an ID or anything else, they can't get a job. Anyway, because the people were washing their faces out in the river because they were in so much pain and had no clean water from the tear gas. So I eventually went to my house and took all the 5-gallon jugs of water I brought in from the U.S. as drinking water so people could clean their faces. There is a list that was being managed by the refugees as to who needs to present when the U.S. allows more people to seek entry for asylum, which means they're taken into custody and sit in a federal jail unless we can match them up with a sponsor in the U.S. and raise money to post their bail. The cartel is now controlling the list. The police arrested some of the asylum seekers and put them in, listen to this, and put them in jail for urinating in the yard of one of the houses we were housing them in. They were doing that because the line to the restroom was so long. Basically, Trump's goons have, and this is my commentary now before we go back to the letter, but Trump's goons have slowed the process down. He tells people go to the legal port of entry and do it the legal way, right? But they've slowed it down to the absolute minimum. They process like 60 people a day. Out of these thousands of people, and maybe kids and mothers and whatever the fuck that are flooding up here trying to fucking, get away from this shit, they keep them there in Tijuana where they have no place to stay, and the people in Tijuana don't want them. So they wonder why they try to rush across the border in the middle of the desert, and then they get fucking arrested and thrown in goddamn jail. Anyway, and there's no place for these people to stay in Tijuana or way for them to support themselves. So anyway, this guy says, we went to the jail to try to pay off the Tijuana police to get them out. And from the front counter, we could hear the two 20-something-year-old kids getting the shit beat out of them in the jail because many of the people here in Tijuana don't like people from South America. The entire thing is such a nightmare. I at times regret my decision to help. The emotional toll is just too much. Just yesterday, one sweet woman who was doing most of the cooking inside the Airbnb house got a call from her mom saying that if she didn't return to Honduras, the people she was running from would kill her parents. And this morning she got on a bus to return. We are now trying to move refugees in the dead of night out of Tijuana to Nogales, where they are processing people faster, but we have to try to operate without the knowledge of the cartel or Mexican immigration. All this because I wanted to come down to Tijuana and offer to spend a few hours a week helping the refugees prepare for their credible fear interviews with the United States government. Anyway, so that's apparently what's really going on around there. And if these people that fucking think that we ought to build this wall and gas these people and not let anybody in, and listen to fucking Trump, if they sat down and thought, how much damage can these 5 or 10,000 people in a country of 150 or what? No, we got 300 million, right? There are 350 million people. Yeah. How much damage can these 5 or 10,000 people who want to get out of a shithole and not be killed, so they don't want to come here and start trouble, they want to get a job and shit, right? And they'll do the work that us white lazy fucks won't do. How are they going to do more damage to this country than this fucking pig fucking imbecile lying sack of shit in the White House that's trying to keep these people out? It's the exact definition of irony that the biggest threat and danger to our country as it exists today is Donald fucking pig-face fucking Trump, the guy that's making the biggest issue out of keeping these poor fuckers in Tijuana where they're getting the shit kicked out of them and tear gassed.
Well, let me just say, the guy who wrote you that letter, he deserves a lot of credit. I commend him. That's tremendous what he's doing. I can't even imagine, going down there and doing something like that is tremendous. But then, like he said, the emotional toll that has to take on you just every day, nonstop, constantly being beaten over the head. Well, not literally, but seeing people beaten over the head and seeing all these things. That 7-year-old girl just died the other day. That broke my heart. And, the sad thing, too, is the fucking architect behind this whole thing. Trump doesn't have ideas. Trump's a moron. But it's this Stephen Miller schmuck who now all of a sudden has a toupee that he wears on his head when he appears on the morning shows. This guy is the guy doing all these things. This hateful fucking weirdo is the guy who set this whole policy in place. And I've seen an interview with his uncle on TV. I saw his old teacher do an interview about it. Well, what an asshole he was when he was a kid. But his uncle said it. Our family were Jewish refugees that fled the Nazis. That's how we came here. That's the thing that gets me. It's like Donald Trump, I believe his mother was an immigrant who came here. His father, or at least his father's father, was an immigrant that came here. Stephen Miller.
His mail-order bride.
His mail-order bride. The employees at his golf club one town over from where I live. There was a thing in the newspaper the other day, illegal immigrants who don't like the way they're being treated there. So if the legal immigrants are good enough for Trump's golf course, then they should be good enough to come into the goddamn country. That's what I have to say about that.
And we could trade. It'd be a good trade. We'd get a bunch of people that would get an honest fucking job and do some fucking work versus this fucking sack of shit that's fucking. Do you just real quick? I wouldn't mean to do this on Christmas. Oh my God! But do you realize how long it's going to? Right now, if they started right now, much less in 2 years, how long it's going to take to actually to figure out, first of all, what this dumb fuck and the rest of his fucking stooges have fucked up. What he's touched that has been fucked up in some way, or what documents have been signed or bills or procedure, whatever the fuck, just what he's fucked up, who he's pissed off, and then to fix it. It's going to take the most of the next fucking Democratic president's term to fucking once again. We got 8 years of Bush, which now looks like fucking Candyland. It looks, let's go to Disney World. Let's have George Bush president again. He just bombed 2 countries and crashed the global economy. Not nearly what this fucking idiot is in the middle of.
At least he meant well.
At least he meant well. So maybe Obama will come back and fix it for us again, since we didn't learn. Many of us did learn the first time, never elect another Republican, but it backlashed with the stupid lobby. The stupid lobby. Anyway.
Hey, Jim, I'd like to make a correction. I was wrong about something. Stephen Miller, his family did not escape the Nazis when they came here. They actually escaped from Belarus, where they were hiding from the Russians who were trying to kill all the Jews. The anti-Jewish Russians were who Stephen Miller's family ran from to come to the United States. So a little correction there.
That's even better. I thought you were going to say, wait a minute, a correction. They did not escape the Nazis. They were all killed, but he's a zombie and was resurrected. That's why he looks so pale. Oh, for fuck's sake. And also, we got this YouTube channel that we got high hopes for. If we get we've got all our paperwork in. We're still waiting to hear on the folks at YouTube about our advertising again. But in the meantime, we're placing quite a lot of entertaining and thoughtful comment and content up on that channel. What is that channel again?
tinyurl.com/official corny YouTube, or just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette, official Jim Cornette Podcast, whatever it may be. It is the one and only official Jim Cornette page on YouTube. And you said we've been putting up great stuff. We've been putting up special edits of the drive-thru and the experience each and every week with amazing artwork that Travis Heckel's been doing. I've received so many compliments from people saying, wow, that artwork, the thumbnail art is so cool. That all goes to Travis Heckel. He's doing a great job with that stuff.
Yeah, Travis Bickle is one of a kind, I'll tell you. And here's another thing. A lot of people said, I don't even listen to it. I turn the sound down. I just stare at the fucking artwork for an hour instead of listening to the show. But if it come for the artwork and stay for the fine audio programming. And also a correction from last week, or for possibly I can't remember. Was it the drive-thru? I don't know. But Christmas movies.
That was the drive-thru, yeah.
I left out 1951's version of A Christmas Carol with Alistair Sim. I apologize for the error.
All right. I'm sure everyone, including Rodney Estee, who sent in that question, will accept your apology.
Well, I didn't want to misrepresent anything. And actually, as I said at the top of the program, I have additional information on some other people that I really, after I gave it thought on the drive-thru, it was just a couple of days ago as we record this now, and I had just seen this incident, there was some more people I should have motherfucked. I really didn't browbeat everybody that was involved in this fucking fiasco. So I wound up the Twitter machine again, and they got mad at me. Well, some people got mad at me. Basically the wrestling is supposed to be silly horseshit fucking crowd that likes all this silly horseshit that they like. They got mad at me, but then all the normal, sane people who like professional wrestling and halfway respect the art of it, then all came out and shit on them and this fucking fat asshole and the whole thing in general. But if you didn't listen to the drive-thru this past Monday, and I don't know what the fuck is the matter with you if you didn't, possibly I'll give you a pass because it's the holidays. We're all busy. But the reason why I was so upset, and I'll say this and we're going to play this so people can hear it, but the reason why I just jumped into it, and Brian, you just asked an innocent question, because I had just seen this clip on Twitter and watched it in fucking just disbelief that a major company would have had their logo in this and somehow, and I thought it was a work at first. I thought somebody's, faked this. Then I realized it was real and it was on Impact's Twitter. But I had just seen it and watched it several times and got stewed up, and then we start doing the program and you asked me the question. So we will pick the tape up from the drive-thru. And this is what I said, and then we'll talk about all the people who got upset about what I said. And we can motherfuck them then.
Our next question here, Jim, sent in to cornydrivethru@gmail.com is from Brad Murr. Jim, what are your thoughts on today's Impact? How do you feel on talent like, you're going to have to excuse me, I don't know a lot of these people, Ali, Lax, Su Yung, and the return of the X Division?
Well, Lax is LAX, Latin American Exchange.
Oh, excuse me. I thought that was another person.
It used to quit. Now it used to be Homicide and Hernandez, and now it's two younger folks that have taken on the mantle. I actually probably would have given them a compliment if this had been taped even a day previously to this. But Impact Wrestling could go fuck themselves and with a rusty fucking fishing knife.
Whoa! Does something happen I don't know about?
Apparently they're doing these, and and Don Callis, I love you, I'm sorry, but unless you fire everybody that had anything to do with this, or Ed Nordholm, if you want to fucking step in and see whose head you can lop off over this, but apparently they're doing these Twitch specials now, and apparently they're doing them in conjunction with local independent promotions, which is a great idea, and actually another one that I had with Ring of Honor a while back to work with the legitimate local promotions in each area that we ran live events in. But nevertheless, I digress. They're doing these, and they were somewhere in Ohio, I now understand, for Ohio versus everything, or Ohio hates everything, or Ohio fucks everything up, or whatever the fuck, which is one of the tag teams. And it's a theme that they were using or what, I don't know. But I saw this on Twitter. It was at first I thought somebody was ribbing that they'd superimposed an Impact Wrestling logo to make Impact look bad or to knock them or whatever. And I thought, well, that's kind of bullshit that you'd fake something, right? That you'd put a recognized company's logo on a piece of shit fucking outlaw match in a barn, right? Come to find out it was on the special that Impact put their name and branding on, where this completely grotesque, unprofessional fat fuck, comedy wrestler in quotation marks, and some other fucking fat outlaw guy wearing his uncle's pajamas, I don't know. And they're in this dark fucking barn. And I assume there were people there past the front row of two sides. You didn't see them much, but whatever the fuck. They didn't have enough of a budget to pipe in some noise. There were some people yelling from the corners. The fat fuck and the other just regular fuck go to do a spot where the regular fuck's dropping down and the fat fuck's jumping over him, right? But the guy drops down and the fat fuck stops and lumbers, because he really can't. He's such a fucking corpulent, obese piece of shit, such a human fucking waterbed, that he can't really get his leg up, but he steps over kind of slowly and again. And then they're just doing slow motion bullshit comedy rest. And then another time the guy goes out on the floor and the fat guy goes like he's going to fucking dive. But of course he can't dive because he looks like one of the McGuire twins. He couldn't get through the ropes. So instead he gets out on the apron and then lumbers down, and they do more fake wrestling. And since Impact Wrestling decided to put their fucking name on that, then they own it and they're responsible for it. So from me, fuck you. Fuck, unless Don Callis or Ed Nordholm or whoever the fuck else is in charge of that goddamn shit show. I tweeted out, this is why their company that once was the only pretender and only competitor to Vince McMahon, thanks to bad creative and bad leadership. And for years in the Spike era, we know who those places were. Thanks to bad creative and bad leadership and letting the fucking guys do a lot of shit they shouldn't have done in the fucking ring. Now they are reduced to on Twitch, broadcasting fucking programs from a barn in Ohio with an unprofessional fat fuck doing spots that make Haystacks Calhoun look like Tiger Mask. And they wonder why I tweeted that your company has the stench of grisly death on it. So fuck that whole goddamn thing. Because they might as well just fold the goddamn tent, and the Canadians might as well just admit they got fucking snookered and just goddamn set fire to whatever they're doing. Because if that's the best they can fucking do, or if they validate that fucking shit in any way with their logo on a broadcast that they're responsible for, they can suck my big fat white fucking dick. Fuck you.
Our next.
So if you'd asked that yesterday, I'd have said, well, they're trying, and, and they've got some good guys there, and some friends of mine or, employees there or whatever. But now, no, after I saw that, fuck you. Just get out of the fucking way at this point. Just let guys go somewhere where they can be fucking stars instead of goddamn subjecting the few remaining legitimate talents that you have left to this fucking horse shit and being associated with that, to where they get the stench of goddamn play wrestlers and grisly death on them too. I don't know why the fucking guys would even goddamn contemplate going to. Why would you want to be involved with Impact Wrestling if that's the kind of shit they're putting out or validating as a talent? Why would you want to be there? Why would you want to be especially not contractually obligated when somebody legitimate might want to give you a fucking job, but just why would you want to validate something like that with your fucking presence if you're a real talent? Fuck. If they can't do any better than that, fucking quit.
Well, there you hear it, Jim, from this week's drive-through. An innocent question, as you said before. I had not seen the clip yet, and I had not been on Twitter yet, paying attention to all the other things besides looking at the corny drive-through questions. So I asked you an Impact question. I had no idea where it would go, and this has become a hot button issue. People on both sides all over the internet now.
Well, there's a lot more people on one side than there is the other, but boy, the other side does make a lot of noise. But here's the thing. Like I said, if you'd asked that question 4 hours previously, I don't even know if I articulated. I was so upset that I had just seen this shit. And like I said, at first I thought, and what it was, I'm not going to mention this guy's name. I'm not going to mention the name of the promotion because none of them deserve any promotion or any notoriety. But Fatty McFatfuck was this fat outlaw guy in a fucking bad outlaw fucking ring in a bad outlaw building working with some other I don't know who the fucking other guy was either, and he willingly went along with this. So, he can fucking sodomize himself with a fishing knife too. But they were basically having a fake match on the premise that the guy was so fat when they do a drop down spot, he'd have to stop and really make an effort to step over the guy. And, all the 100 people in this barn were laughing about it and everything. And it was everything that you would think of was wrong with any type of independent wrestling, or it was what people who hate wrestling and despise wrestling and want to see wrestling abolished would think of as wrestling, that type of thing, which of course means that some of these new people like it. But anyway, I had seen that, and so I had that reaction. And then of course Twitter has continued to blow up, and the dick spot guy weighed in. He was like, well, considering that everybody that Cornette has hated over the last 20 years gets over, you're probably in good company. I mean, Brian, should you do the list or should I? I'm not. Everybody that I've been against over the last 20 or 25 years, one of them's a mayor of Knox County, Tennessee.
Hold on. How many years exactly
5 or 6 other of them are multi-millionaires in the course of a year.
Did he say 20 years or 25 years? Let's make this accurate.
Well, I said 20. Well, I think he said 20 years. So that would take out then everybody except for Cena and Orton and Batista and Lesnar and everybody on down that I've either helped train or given their break to, or started in the business to begin with, or found in camps, or put on television for the first time, or whatever the fuck. But none of them or their group are amongst them, so they do not like me. But anyway, here's the thing. I said there were more people to be motherfucked. As I sat down and thought about this, and some people, of course, came to the defense of it because they said, oh, this is a local promotion in Ohio, and they have their own talent and their own fans, and this guy was over with their local fans. First of all, if this guy's over with their local fucking fans, it gives you an idea of the rest of the talent. And if the rest of the talent had anything whatsoever, why would this shitball have even been exposed, given a chance to get over? Since he looks so fucking ridiculous. I had other people say, well, you managed Yokozuna. He was fat. Oh, for God's sake. Oh, how do you deal with that? That's like arguing with a Trumper. They thought that just because this guy was doing a blatantly phony match in cooperation with another phony wrestler, and he looked like a piece of shit in his goddamn homemade fucking tights, that the only problem I had with him was that he's overweight. So, but anyway, so I'm told that it's a local promotion. I start thinking, well, what the fuck were these people thinking? Here's some local fucking independent promotion in some fucking podunk town in Ohio, gets the opportunity to work with Impact Wrestling. Well, say what you will, they do have a television platform. They do have somewhat international distribution still. They do have a company that I would reasonably assume is worth more than the fucking parent company of this goddamn local organization in Ohio backing Impact Wrestling, right? So in this case, Impact Wrestling is the big brother. And instead of finding the best talent in the state that they could book, that they could show on this program that is being broadcast on, apparently Twitch is one of the internet broadcasting platforms, right? Oh, genius broadcaster.
Yeah, originally it was mostly for gaming, and now they're trying to branch out beyond gaming, especially with all the problems people have had with YouTube. They're trying to steal some of that business.
Well, whatever the point is, the Impact Wrestling is the ones that are brought. This is under Impact's umbrella, and I've assumed they had talent there. I didn't see the entire show. A little bit was enough for me. But they're on Impact Wrestling's Twitch. This company has a chance to find anybody in Ohio that they think should be seen by a fucking wide audience that are professionals and deserve a break. Where was Flying Brian Jr.? He lives in Ohio. I'm just bringing a name out there. And they have the opportunity to put on a first-class operation. It's their obligation as the local promotion, and I've been in that situation with the WWE and with TNA and with Ring of Honor. You put your best talent on the show. You make sure that there's as many people in the building as possible. If it's not full, it's closed. Of course, it would be hard to not be full in this fucking thing from what I saw. And you put on the best show that you can put on to put everybody's foot forward. And they put one enormously fat, obnoxious outlaw fuck, and the other one was just the regular fat, obnoxious outlaw fuck, in a ring to have a fucking fake match in front of people because your 100 local fans will giggle at that. Your 100 local fans that you have already poisoned their mind. Now you're just gonna, for the sake of it, to get them to laugh one time at a fucking match, you're gonna make these people think that you're an idiot, because that, I guarantee you, somebody in the fucking company thinks that. But here's the second. So I want to motherfuck the local promotion, because you goddamn, and I've promoted some fucking major events and some major arenas in this fucking country. And I've promoted in conjunction with those companies that I mentioned, and I've provided local talent or regional talent. And I've done these jobs from the WWF on down. And I would never have allowed something like that on a fucking undercard of a show we had anything to do with a major fucking company. So this fucking outlaw mud show outfit needs to fucking go away. And the more I thought about it, then I realized, wait a minute, what the fuck? Impact Wrestling's Twitter is how I first saw this. That's why I thought, well, wait a minute, this has got to be a goddamn rib. Somebody's fucking saying this is an Impact show. Whoever runs Impact Wrestling's Twitter feed or account or whatever you call it is the biggest goddamn idiot on the fucking planet. And I assure you that if it was my company, if it was Jeff Jarrett's company, still, if it was anybody's wrestling company apart from Impact Wrestling in the history of wrestling companies, that motherfucker would have got fired by being thrown out a fucking window. And the more I said and thought, and they actually, not only did they have it on a show that technically, I guess, they had little control over. Apparently, there was nobody standing over watching them. But then the only reason that I even saw it to call attention to it and cause all this turmoil was because their fucking Twitter idiot tweeted it like it's something to be proud of. Hey, look at our fucking company. What we just put out on this goddamn broadcasting platform that we were in charge of. Aren't we proud? So that guy should be goddamn boiled in oil and have the fat sold for soap. Because now have they just got high school fucking kids coming in to run the Twitter? Anyway.
Crazy.
I just wanted to bring those up because I didn't cover all of the motherfucks that I should have. But
in general, wrestling has a bunch of fucking idiots running social media accounts for wrestling companies. And that's been the case for years. It's usually just the uncreative, the stupid, the people who don't understand how to build an audience or build a community. It's really always been a problem. Every single wrestling company, WWE does better than most, but all of these guys just have complete fucking idiots on social media.
But now answer me this, because now you made me think. Somebody I saw having an argument with somebody on Twitter, imagine that, here not long ago, said something to the effect of, well, you know that all the wrestlers have somebody doing their tweeting for them, like especially when the girls are cutting hot promos on each other back and forth. I think it's, well, you know, somebody writes those. They don't actually have somebody writing the tweets for the talents' accounts, do they?
I don't think so, but I'll ask. I've never asked anyone that question, but now I have reason to ask. I'll ask. I wouldn't fucking think still yet that they would have gone that far. No, I don't think.
They just cut promos for themselves anymore.
I mean, as I'm thinking about it, without giving away names, there are people I'm in regular communication with on Twitter. They message me on Twitter, and it's from the same account that they have their tweets. So no, I don't think anyone's writing their promo. At least those people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Trump, someone's writing his promos because he can't spell.
Oh yeah, no. And anytime the words are spelled right and it actually makes sense as a sentence, somebody's written it for him. It's just the madness that tumbles out of his fucking toilet head, in the early morning when he's all by himself, with Pete in hand, wishing Melania still gave a shit. She's given up by now. She's he's never going to fucking die.
She's an asshole too. Fuck her. She's an asshole too.
Fuck her. Yes, she's an asshole too because she's complicit in the whole thing. But she's given up on him dying and just like, I ain't fucking you anymore. Fuck it. Change the fucking will if you want.
I think she was in this the whole time for just money and whatever it got her. I mean, let me ask you this, Jim. Tell me if you know other situations like this. How many other pseudo models from Eastern Europe do you know that come to New York City and hang out in nightclubs to meet 65-year-old guys who are there with other women and looking for someone new to hang out with? It doesn't make any sense.
How many? How many? Almost every fucking hot model from fucking Yugoslavia and Bratistopia and wherever the fuck else she's from. I don't know. All of her body parts are not from the same country anyway. So we're not sure exactly. She may have slipped through the illegal immigration issue because some of her was manufactured in this country, potentially.
She has so much plastic surgery, she looks like an alien now. All of those Trump kids, how much fat has been sucked out of their necks?
Well, apparently not. It keeps collecting there. They probably have a crew of fat suckers. Every night before they go to bed, they have a 15-minute fat sucking session where they suck some more fat out of their fucking face. Fucking fat fucks.
They take it out of their necks and put it into Melania's face.
And and then they shipped it to Ohio and put it into Fatty McFat. He's a ball of Trump goo, is what he. All right, now
has he actually tweeted at you, the actual guy?
Oh yeah, but I ain't gonna fucking say his name because that would give him publicity. But he thinks that he well, oh goddamn, I forgot he tweeted a picture of him. He tweeted a picture of him standing next to Ricky Steamboat. Like, hey, well, fucking Steamboat doesn't think the same. Like, if I have my picture taken with Keith Richards, that means I can play the guitar? What the fuck? Well, here's me and the dragon, Ricky Steamboat, for an alternative viewpoint of whether I'm a big, fat, useless fuck or not. Good God, he'd have to flap his arms so you could tell whether he was rolling or walking, this fucking guy. His waistline has a goddamn gravitational pull. Anyway, we have in the spirit of the season, one of the Cult of Cornette listeners, and you can tell when I read this, he is a devoted listener, has done quite a Christmas poem for us. And I thought I would articulate this, being as it's Christmas.
Yes.
And this is from Jerry with a G. 'Twas the day of the podcast, and Cornette was mad. President Cuntflap did something else stupid and bad. And with orders to Cornette's collectibles galore, there was nearly a burger towel left in the store. The UPS man came with too large of a truck. Back out of that driveway, good fucking luck. The guys fixing the gate threw up their hands. We can't figure it out. Well, I'll be goddamned. Then came the ramp at the Philly Con Center and the shithead guard not letting him enter. The Salvation Army turned the mattress away. The fuckers at YouTube still don't want to pay. The English were shocked when he pissed out the car door. A giant raccoon broke in and shat on the floor. Fuck Russo, fuck Horner, fuck Santino Marella, fuck Terry Landell and that Omega fella. Don't steal his camera if you don't want your windows smashed up. French toast is for Yankees. Don't make him throw up.
Oh, come on.
Buddy Landell had to leave for singing a song. Wrestling these days does everything wrong. Ring rope should be cable, not actual rope. Up yours, Kevin Dunn, you beaver-toothed dope. Fans once chased him out to Bill Watts' Rolls Royce. The artful Dodger makes fun of his voice. Old Bolin is leaking. The pony is won. The battle is over. The bad guys have won. Yet with the Kentuckiana Princess and Brian Last at his side, he maintains his honor, gumption, and pride. To all the cultists, Cornette's our favorite guy. To everyone else, thank you, fuck you, and bye.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's from Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. We give you a small smattering of applause there. But, it started me thinking, I'm quite famous for my own poems, at Christmas time from years ago. And the people who got the Midnight Express book know this, not to rub it in because they're reprinted in the book. But we haven't told this story in a long time. Since you've been on the staff here, as they say, have we told the story of the Christmas poems?
Never on the air with me, no.
For our new listeners, then, What had happened, we've talked about Crockett history before. And in 1988, when they started talking about selling Jim Crockett Promotions to Turner Broadcasting for World Championship Wrestling. Early in 1988, Stan Lane, Bobby Eaton, and I had re-signed contracts with Crockett Promotions. It had been after the bashes in 87, really the business started going down, and we've talked about the variety of reasons for it. Buying all those territories, expanding too fast, absorbing the UWF, the amount of TV tapings they had to do to take care of all these different syndicated shows they had. They pissed off a lot of the regular markets. Talent was there was too much talent just on the cards and in the mix and not focus as like there had been. It was a bit of a mess too quick. And business from late 87 and through spring of 88 had been pretty crummy, the worst since we had been there. People would still kill for it now these days, but you know what I'm saying. And our money was down also because even though we were on guarantees back then, the Crockett guarantees were for balloon payments at the end. If I guarantee you $150,000 a year and I've only at the end of the year paid you 112, I owe you 38 grand, right? And business had been so strong for so long that nobody had actually ever, I don't think to that point, been owed a balloon payment because they'd always made more than what their minimum was they'd signed up for, at least as far as I know. But anyway, that was apparently going to change because our checks were down, right? And we'd lost talent. And that's when I think Nikita Koloff, we were working a deal with he and Dusty, but Nikita quit the business for a while because his wife was sick, and we had the New Breed, but they got in a car wreck, and just our various programs had been curtailed for no fault of ours, right? So we had gone in and renegotiated with Jimmy Crockett, who was in March and April. He was convinced that this new Turner Broadcasting ad, they hadn't started the talks for the sale yet at that point. We got right in there. He was convinced that the new shows on TBS with the ad revenue and pay-per-view and et cetera was going to make him a lot of money before he realized that Vince was going to fuck him on a lot of that, and the rest of it wasn't going to work out either. So we negotiated deals to raise our minimums, still on a balloon payment deal, but at least we had something on paper, from $150,000 to $225,000 each, right? And when we left Crockett's office, me and Bobby stand in the parking lot, I said, I don't know if he's going to pay us each $225,000, but we got his name on paper, right? We got these contracts right here. So, of course, Dusty, then later on, shortly after those contracts were signed, that's when they found out they were in trouble. Talks began with TBS. Dusty was wanting to save things as best he could, and especially save his job. He hot-shotted a bunch of stuff on the 88 Bash Tour, and business came back. The people came back to the buildings. Not like the record year in 86, but they started doing good business again. And then he prepared his two big main matches that he wanted to come out of the Bashes, as we've talked about. Ric Flair and Lex Luger in rematches for the NWA title, and Midnight Express and myself against Tully and Arn with JJ for the tag titles. And that's what he was going into the fall with, to try to put his best foot forward, which was also working. From the time we started with them in August through mid-September when they left, we sold out the Richmond Coliseum, $140,000 gate. We drew 13,000 people almost at the first event at the Charlotte Coliseum, the new Charlotte Coliseum they'd built. Our checks were way up. Everything's looking lovely, and then they leave for reasons we've discussed. And all of a sudden, our checks, me and the Midnight Express, go back down again. And that's when the sale was pretty much going to be finalized, and we heard from Jim Crockett's attorney that they would be settling the balloon payments that were owed, because as of November 1st, and see, at the time we thought, well, if Turner Broadcasting takes this thing over, we'll get all our money, right? Because they got money. That's when we were all told, not just myself and Midnight Express, but everybody that was on contract, the top guys that had money due, were told that Jimmy Crockett would be responsible for the contracts to November 1st, and Turner Broadcasting would be responsible for them afterwards. So that meant that we still need to get our balloon payment for what we were short for that first 6 months off of Jimmy Crockett. That's when his attorney informed us that due to the lack of available finances, that we would be getting 40 cents on the dollar. 40 cents on the dollar is a lot different than $1 on the dollar.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, they came to us. It was me, Bobby, Stan. I don't know. I'm not going to speak because I don't know for sure who everybody else was. I think I know of a few of the suspects, but his attorney did come to us and say, look, here's the thing. There's an available amount of money. If you guys, who are the guys that he wanted to take care of as best he could, will all agree to take 40 cents on the dollar, we can pay all y'all off 40 cents on the dollar. If you won't, then it'll go to court, and by the time it goes through, being realistic, bankruptcy, et cetera, you ain't gonna get anything. So guess who all took 40 cents on the dollar? Everybody. Yeah. But we were still smarting a bit, because here's the fucking thing. Not only when we asked to renegotiate, we went in and we said, look, we know it's not your fault that all of our programs with these different teams have been stymied and stifled, and that things have changed and et cetera in early 88 for the previous 6 months. And we know that you guys are expanding a lot, et cetera, but we've been here since the start. And of everybody on the heel roster, us and the Horsemen, who the Horsemen were about to renegotiate, and from what I heard from Little Bird, they didn't get in time and ended up with the same contract. So I believe they got a little bit less of a balloon payment. But anyway, us and the Horsemen have been your guys and been the guys that have drawn all this money. And so we want some kind of reassurance. And that's when Crockett had started extolling the virtues of all of the commercial revenue from the syndication network and the new Sunday night main event TBS show. And we said we wanted more money, some kind of better financial deal, but we never threw out an amount, right? But he kept just crowing and praising what we're going to do and the pay-per-view thing, and we got this and that, and these agencies are going to be selling ad time, right? So finally, we're sitting there about the third time we had a meeting. I said, Jimmy, I figured let's just start somewhere. I said, I'll be ridiculous. Jimmy, Jesus Christ, it sounds like we're all going to make $250,000 a piece next year. He said, I swear to God, this is what he said. He said, I don't know if it's quite that. I can't remember what I had you figured at, but I believe we're close. I said, well, why don't we come back next week when you figure out your figuring? When you found your figuring, we'll come back and figure it. That's actually what I said. Well, when you don't have your notes in front of you, you get your notes. We'll come back next week. What have you got us figured at? Okay. Now this is the only reason why I suspect that sometime between that week and the next week, even before he signed our contract, he may have been giving us a gift. I should not have thought bad about him. He may have been giving us a gift of, well, at least maybe TBS will pay this off. He didn't know that ahead of time. But sometime between that week and the next week, I don't know whether he found out that there was trouble or not. But we go in the next week, and I swear to God it was this hard. We sat down, and I said, well, Jimmy, did you find your notes? Yes, I did. I said, what did you have us down as? He said, I had you guys in the $200,000 a year level. And I swear to God, I said this. I said, well, last week we said 250. You say 200. Why don't we just settle for 225? And he said, okay. Boom. I could have fucking pissed myself. I was kidding again. So anyway, but here's the thing. By the end of that year, like I said, he owes us he owed us 66 and we got 26. That's 40 cents on the dollar. So, but we each got a check for $26,000 in one lump sum, in addition to our checks that we've been getting all along each week. But it sure would have been nice to get $66,000 in one lump sum. But at that point, we were kind of hot, because we were like, wait a minute. Not only did you tell us that we were figured into this upper echelon, we've drawn all this money we set all these record houses for you. Now we brought business back again. It was Flair and Luger and Midnight and Tully and Arn that brought the business back, that made it look real good for TBS right before the sale, and they tanked it again. And then Tully and Arn leave and quit, and we're here, and we get fucked out of fucking $40,000, right? So anyway, we were hot. We took the deal. And then we said, well, at least now we won't have any problems with Turner Broadcasting. Right. And so that Christmas, because this was November 1st, 88. So that Christmas, I wrote a Christmas poem, and I used to send out Christmas cards to people, actual physical Christmas cards with stamps on them and everything, to like 250 people a fucking year, right? Because I had everybody's address, because back then you did. Now I don't have anybody's fucking address. Well, I know where you live. But anyway, so I wrote this Christmas poem, and I put it in all the Christmas cards, and I sent Flair, Dick Murdoch loved it. You know, all the guys that I gave cards to. And actually, I think it was that year that it was the second year that Meltzer printed it in the Observer?
Second year, I think.
It was the second year. Okay, well then I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, this was the first one, ladies and gentlemen. Twas the night before Christmas, 1988, as read from the rare and prestigious Midnight Express scrapbook. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and Jim Crockett was broke. All the creditors were stirring. They couldn't find the old bloke. The lawsuits were filed by the attorneys with care, but it was all for nothing. The money just wasn't there. The wrestlers' credit ratings were dying or dead, while visions of big contracts danced in their heads. And Dusty in Texas, thinking that he was through, was plotting to kill the big pay-per-view. When from the dressing room there arose such a clatter, they sent poor Johnny Weaver to see what was the matter. We want our money, said the Warriors with a growl, and we're going to get it through fair means or foul. Better luck than we had, said the Express with disgust. The only thing left in his pocket is dust. Away to the box office they all flew in a flash, thinking they could snatch a big handful of cash. But the gate had been killed by a dozen no-shows when half the talent decided to New York they should go. When what to our tear-filled eyes should appear but Jim Crockett himself, smelling strongly of beer. With plane tickets in hand that were purchased so cheaply, we knew in a moment they were issued by Lindsay. And he wheezed and he belched and he called us by name. On Rotunda, on Steiner, on Rogers and Fulton, on Stinger, on Luger, on Ivan and Sullivan. Move on to Atlanta, things will be better. The travel's out of there, didn't you get my letter? As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, the sheep herders ran off before he bled them dry. But Crockett didn't care how many followed their tracks. Rhodes was in every angle. He could pick up the slack. And even though Flair was world heavyweight champ, he couldn't get a pin over a kid in summer camp. It seemed that the boys would never get their due, even though so many had threatened to sue, and contracts were settled for way less than half. Up in Greenwich, it seemed Grinch Vince would have the last laugh. When in came Ted Turner with money and power and rescued Jim Crockett at the very last hour. Offices were closed, incompetence fired, power plays were won, and executives hired. And of the departed, many of you know who. TBS people said, what the hell did they do? We can find no reason but nepotism and insanity for these folks to have jobs. That's what caused this calamity. And then the revolution was finally completed, and the talent felt at last they would be fairly treated. Some problems remained to be smoothly worked out, but the boys will get paid, at least of that there's no doubt. But what of Jim Crockett, you ask one more time? Didn't he have to pay out his very last dime? Only if you don't happen to count the millions in his personal Swiss bank account. Then raising his finger, spilling scotch from his glass, and telling us all to kiss his rosy red ass, he was heard to exclaim as he snuck out of sight, 40 cents to all, and to all, fuck you.
How long did it take you to do that?
One night, one evening, sitting home in Charlotte, it just came to me.
Do you worry at all about getting heat for any of the things you said if you're sending it out to any of the boys?
Well, actually, David Crockett was still fucking working there at TBS, but I was kind of pissed off about that 40 grand if I mentioned that before.
What did you say? Nepotism and insanity. Was that the line?
Yeah. We can find no reason but nepotism and insanity for some of these folks to have jobs. That's what caused this calamity. But no, so I sent those out. And I didn't send credit cards to anybody that either wasn't in the rest of credit cards. Try that again. I didn't send credit cards to anybody. I didn't send Christmas cards to anybody that either wasn't in the business or smart to the business. So everybody pretty much, because I didn't know there was nobody in my social circle that was not either in the business or smart to the business. in 1980s. There barely is today. So anyway, but but once again, people they got a hoot of it. Flair liked it. Dick Murdoch, I remember especially. So anyway, then 2 years later at Christmas time is when I've just fucking left WCW. And now 2 years later, we know that the only thing the boys got was paid, and they have wrecked this whole goddamn thing, right? So I had a little bit more spare time, and I worked on this for a couple days because I wanted to make this better. And I actually really referred heavily to the first poem to make sure that even the stanzas were correct and et cetera, right? But I did this also in honor of Dick Murdoch because he just always loved this shit. Anyway, this was from Christmas 1990 and is entitled "The Grinch That Stole Wrestling." Me. 'Twas the night before Christmas, 2 years after the bye, and the state of pro wrestling would bring a tear to your eye. "We're changing the scripts," the New York Times quote had read. All the secrets were out and pro wrestling was dead. All the grandiose visions of lights, glory, and fame, of $1 million pro wrestling achieving national acclaim, had been supplanted instead by what the corporate world had borne, a farce of pro wrestling deserving only of scorn. Oh, at first they had tried very hard, but they hired a VP who had little regard for the business to which so many others were committed. He knew not the first thing, but he would never admit it. When suddenly from the office there was such a big fight, they sent James E. Barnett to help out if he might. He returned with pale face and a trembling hand. "Yet another of our bookers has been promptly canned. We'll depend on the champ," the few faithful did think. Ric Flair has saved many from a sea of red ink. Away to Charlotte they went with anticipation, knowing Flair could light fires under the whole wrestling nation. But the brains in Atlanta had closed the mine of gold. Who wants to see Flair? He's 10 years too old. Then what strange sight did our shocked eyes meet? But Jim heard himself, his face red as a beet. With contracts in hands given out to unknowns, we knew in a moment all our hope had just flown. And he ranted and raged, and he called out these names. On Funk, on Steamboat, on Warriors and Flair, on Midnight, on Cornette. Get the hell out of there. You must step aside for these faces that are new. We'll draw 20 million with this musclehead stew. The Clash ratings proved, believe you me, we can sell this green talent if the show is for free. As rain clouds dry up in the hot desert sky, the attendance dwindled. Ratings began to die. TBS didn't sit still. No, they planned their attack. No blood, no violence. That'll get these crowds back. And even though Watts was a phone call away, they couldn't have that. Why, he'd get in the way. Because after all, as part of his deal, he'd want the fans to think wrestling matches are real. So into their skulls another notion did fly. We'll make sillier shows that all the kids will buy. Hence action the fans continued to crave. Up north it seemed Vince had dug a similar grave when that cranky old herd found a foolproof new plan. He hired Moldy Oldie, wrestling's grumpy old man. Morale dropped lower. Old cronies were brought in. Even with an old hand, it seemed no one could win. Whatever knack had been had way back when, by Ole for booking, had left him by then. The best to be done by that sarcastic old rat was a heel who pulled rabbits out of his scorpion hat. Anybody want to draw? Chip Burnham's trademark line was reduced to, here's 20, and a pitiful whine. The ship sank slowly with all hands on board while Nero Hurd fiddled and Petrick looked bored. The potential of this venture slipped away like sand, butchered by businessmen who couldn't find their ass with both hands. And then the murder was finished at last of this business which boomed in the not-distant past. Every fan knew the words kayfabe, mark, and more. A few blamed the sheets, but promoters told millions more. But what of Jim Herd, you ask with a shout? Couldn't Petrick or Turner force the old Grinch on out? Sad to say, the world of corporate affairs seems to guarantee that he'll always be there. So raising his fist, cursing under his breath, and condemning Dave Meltzer to a horrible death, he was heard to exclaim as he flew to St. Louis, I should have stuck with pizza. Wrestling? Ah, phooey.
Well, you really mellowed with Ole over the years. I think it's easy to forget how in 1990, Ole was not one of your favorite people.
Oh, I was hot at Ole back then. But see now, after I've been a booker and an owner and etc., I can see that he didn't want to fucking die on that hill with Jim Herd because he knew Herd was an idiot like we all did. But also he had a bunch of shitty ideas, but I forgive him personally. But also I think Ole finally became fulfilled the Ole principle that he gave me, right? I used to think you were a dumb fuck, Cornette, but so many other dumb fucks came along that were worse than you. You moved up the ladder without doing anything. So many other goddamn more horrendous offenses to my life have come along in wrestling that Ole Anderson, who I could at least admire for the success he had as a wrestler and booker in his day, than these goddamn simpleton wannabes that have never done fucking jack shit or smoked anybody and think they're goddamn experts, that you can't be as mad at Ole.
Were you at all reticent about having Meltzer publish that?
No, I don't remember if he asked me. I loved it, but I'm not sure. I think he just put it up. I can't remember. Maybe we'll have to ask him sometime if he asked me. But when I opened the Observer, I was like, oh, he printed my poem. But yeah, because he actually that was the second year he printed it. But I guess he figured, well, they know how he feels since I just walked out and all. But some people wrote and said, why the fuck? And when he still had the reader's page, he had to print one of these, I think. Why the fuck did you print that poem and say Jim Cornette wrote it? Won't it get heat? And he's like, no, he really did write it. I'm like, yes, I really did write it. Thank you for publishing my work. I'm a published author. But I apparently I didn't give a fuck back then either, did I? Now that I could, this has seemed to become a lifelong pattern.
When did you guys find out that Jim Herd worked at Pizza Hut? Was it right away or was it after the fact?
He's a former executive from Pizza Hut. As soon as we heard because first thing we said, who the fuck is Jim Herd? Well, he's a former executive from St. Louis and Pizza Hut. And he was once the director at Channel 11, the studio director when they did the wrestling show there, back when they didn't really even smarten up the fucking local fucking TV crews in a lot of cases. So who knows? And he did, it's not like he did it for 20 years either. But that was his connection to wrestling. But Petrick, his wife, knew fucking Herd's wife, and then they were able to contact Larry Matazik and through that St. Louis connection. And they, instead of bringing in Larry Matazik to fucking book, they brought in Jim Herd to run the whole fucking thing. So their very first major decision set the pattern for whenever they had a clear-cut choice of the right thing and the wrong thing to do, they picked the wrong thing every time for the next 6 fucking years or so.
I just wish there was a 1989 edition so we could hear the in-between Jim Cornette.
I don't think I celebrated Christmas that year because it was fuck. But but anyway, those and once again, maybe not giving a fuck maybe works for you because I didn't give a fuck there, and that was Christmas of 1990 In February of 1993, I was back on their pay-per-view because a fucking sane person was in charge briefly. And I was also in the WWF that same year, and I worked with them for fucking years. And basically, when I express opinions and they are correct, any place that I want to go back to generally has me back. It's just the places that I don't want to be associated with that I don't show up at.
Hey, can I ask you a quick question I'd never asked you before? When you went back in 93 for that brief period of time when Bill Watts was there, and actually you were there when Bill Watts had already left. You finished out your run there.
Yep.
Jim Ross was also forced out around that time. And it really, I think, hurt the product, especially getting him off the Saturday Night Show, replacing Giovanni.
Yeah.
It really, really hurt the product. Do you think there was any way Jim Ross could have stayed in WCW after the Bill Watts era?
Well, yes, because here's the fucking thing. He didn't just say I'm quitting because Bill Watts is gone.
Right.
The first thing they did was transfer him off of television into ad sales. Oh, just go sell ads. What?
Yeah, see, that's such a stupid move. What a stupid move.
Well, because they wanted
move.
Well, they wanted him to leave because certain people now said, well, we'll have a chance to fucking do whatever the fuck. So they wanted him to fucking leave. And which, of course, he did and got a much better financial deal and a much better job in a much better fucking place. It was much more financially stable. But that's the thing is nobody was in charge of anything there for long. Even if Herd stayed for 3.5 years, and I think he was probably the longest running guy that was in charge of the fucking thing. And he presided over about 8 or 9 different iterations of the booking committee. during that time. So there was a new booker every 3 to 6 months. It was a fiasco. And they didn't know who to trust or who to listen to because the fucking guy in charge in the chair was a complete idiot and didn't know what he was. It's just, as a matter of fact, just like the White House today. The guy in charge in the chair is a complete idiot, doesn't know how the shit's supposed to run to begin with, and he's listening to the wrong people and has a bunch of fucking idiots around him, either liars, crooks, idiots, charlatans.
No, but Trump's worse than Hurd. At least Hurd later on admitted he did stupid shit.
But it's the same principle though. Shit trickles down. That's the economy doesn't trickle down, but shit does. And right now, that's what's happening is we're starting to get trickled all the shit. The stock market had its worst December since 1931 in the midst of the Great Depression because all this artificial hotshotting that the idiots has done is starting to wear off. And plus people are getting worried about the shit that he's doing and the shit that he has done. And the people that are being indicted and pleading guilty and the trade wars and the fucking lack of goddamn coherent fucking leadership in anything. And it's going to take a while to figure it out, but eventually we will. And hopefully maybe, although it's ridiculous to think that we'll learn a lesson. We didn't learn a lesson after Sandy Hook. We didn't learn a lesson after fucking Bush. We're not going to learn a lesson after Trump, but at least he will make people mad enough. And by the time 2020 rolls around, desperate enough to go out and vote to get rid of him just to try to save and salvage what we can before it's really too late. And then we can go about rebuilding some semblance of goddamn sanity after, and then possibly they can indict him and send him to fucking prison if he lives that long. He may die and get out of all this.
I just hope we don't get a K. Allen Fry regime after Trump.
Well, we will if we get Pence. But once again, by 2020, we can start trying to rebuild. But anyway, but it's the same thing. Shit trickles down. If the guy in the chair don't know what he's fucking doing, nobody else does either. And that's exactly what happened with WCW, and that's exactly what's happened with the United States of America. So Merry Christmas, everybody. The worst stock market since the Great Depression. You may lose your health care. They don't want you to have any kind of fucking health care because it might cost the government money, but they want to spend billions of dollars on building a wall to keep all the people that'll do all the work out. And meanwhile, go to church on Sunday and worship an invisible man in the sky who will protect you because we're melting the planet that you live on. But otherwise than that, it's been a Christmas show, hasn't it, Brian?
A Christmas miracle, some might say.
A Christmas miracle. I want to thank you, Brian, for being the greatest co-host that a boy could have over the last year and over your tenure here. I want to thank all the Cult of Cornette members for listening to the program, my personal therapy session every week, most of the time. I want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody that's made it. Once again, I don't know if this year will be more successful than last year for Cornette's Collectibles just because last year blew the roof off, but it's going to be close. Thank you for that. Merry Christmas to everybody except anybody that voted for fucking Donald Trump and got us in this goddamn predicament, and we're all at fucking risk because of you, and you will never be able to live it down, and your descendants will have shame placed upon them. Shame on their names for supporting a man who's done this much damage that only eons later and generations down the line will we be able to figure out, identify, and rectify. So if you voted for Donald Trump, not Merry Christmas, fuck you. But for everybody else, Merry Christmas, everybody.